Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Mark Gabberty, and this is the podcast for entrepreneurs who are looking for the breakthrough for their businesses. One of the biggest opportunities for us to explore, it's great for a side hustle, it's also great for doing full-time, is scaling your very own Amazon FBA enterprise. And when people go on Amazon, they have that mindset where they're going to buy something. It's not like social media where you go on there, you're not thinking about buying a product. Like when you go on Amazon, you go there to buy, which is one of the reasons why Amazon FBA is doing so well and resulting in a lot of millionaires, such as the guest who you'll be hearing from in this episode. So today's guest is a seasoned e-commerce entrepreneur who makes $400,000 per month in Amazon sales. He is also the founder of Jungle Scout, a popular Amazon keyword research software that helps Amazon sellers find and analyze profitable products to sell on Amazon. Today's guest for episode 117 of the Breakthrough Success Podcast is none other than Greg Mercer. Greg, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Mark, I am really stoked to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
Greg, I really look forward to diving really deep into Amazon FBA. Again, this is great for anyone who wants to just do an extra side hustle or someone who just wants to pursue this full time. So you got a lot of different size hats to embrace Amazon FBA. But before we get into it, I'd love to hear your backstory a little bit. So why did you get started with Amazon FBA?
Yeah, excellent question. So if we rewind all the way to my college days, I went to school to be a civil engineer, graduated, and I got into the corporate world working as a civil engineer. I didn't like it. My whole life I've had this strong entrepreneurial spirit. I wanted more out of life. So I started to sell stuff on Amazon just as a side hustle. So I still had my full-time job. I had the goal of replacing that income, with money made through, other businesses. And I was able to do that. So after about a year of selling products on Amazon, I kind of figured it out. I was able to replace my, engineering income with the money I was making on Amazon FBA. That's when I quit my job and I started selling on Amazon full time. So that's kind of how I got started into it. This was 4 or 5 years ago now. So I was a full-time Amazon seller for a little while. Shortly thereafter, I saw this need in the software space to help people, including myself, or it was just myself at the time, find more products to launch on Amazon or find what opportunities were profitable. And that's how Jungle Scout was born. So that's kind of how I got to where I'm at today. So today I spend the majority of my time running the software business, but I still have my Amazon FBA business as well, and it's still thriving.
And it's interesting how you mentioned that you first had the job, then you get into Amazon FBA, and then after you realize, hey, this could replace my income, that's when you made the jump. And looking back, I'm sure you're looking at this as like, that was such a great decision because now I'm able to make all this revenue. I'm able to make a big difference. But for the person who is listening to this, they may still have that 9-to-5 job and they may be doing something like Amazon FBA. How did you determine when you would go from the job to Amazon FBA full time?
Yeah, so for me, it was actually when I was able to replace my income. So I was making more money from, my FBA business than as I was from my corporate job. And for me, that was plenty to say okay, I'm going to go at this full time. I don't know exactly what the future holds anymore. It's a little less maybe stable or less predictable than staying kind of in this corporate world. But for me, that was plenty of really, I just needed to prove to myself that I was able to make this work, So for me, after replacing my income, so that was just, let's call it $5,000 a month in profit. That's when I was okay, I have enough to live off of now. And I've really just proven to myself that I can make this work. And that's when I felt confident quitting.
When you did first start, at some point, you decide Amazon FBA, I've heard some sides of the argument where some people, they're all Amazon FBA. Other people, they like the eBay structure more than they like Amazon FBA. So do you have advice for anyone who's deciding between eBay or Amazon FBA? And if you could share any of the differences between the two.
Yeah, so I haven't sold on eBay before, so I'm not super educated in that particular field. That being said, if you look at any of the kind of like data out there, all signs point to just Amazon kind of like taking over the world, right?
Yeah.
That's where kind of like everyone's doing their shopping now. They just have like such momentum and are on such a crazy trajectory of, how much volume they're doing and how many customers are going there. And the other big reason that I chose, Amazon FBA as opposed to like eBay is one of the beautiful things about Amazon or the FBA program. A lot of people aren't familiar with it, but they actually will store and then pick, pack, and ship your products when someone purchases them. So they're not only the channel that people are using to find your products, but you can also mail them your products. They store them in their warehouses. And when someone places an order through Amazon, they go to the warehouse, they pick, pack, and ship it to the customer. So it's very hands-off, whereas most people who are selling, say, on eBay or even their own e-commerce stores, most of them are doing the fulfillment themselves, which is pretty like, it's kind of like dirty work, right? I mean, it's just like not the best use of most people's times. In the early days when you have to hustle and do whatever it takes to make it work, I think that's fine. But most of the people listening to this podcast, their brains are better used elsewhere as opposed to like maybe in their garage, like packing boxes and shipping them out.
It's interesting that difference between eBay and Amazon. I mean, Amazon has these warehouses, so it's not like you have to hold on to that inventory. Because one thing I do see with eBay sellers is that they have to have like a lot of space to keep everything, because like in some cases you're selling on eBay, like you have to hold on to the item for a while. It becomes more valuable. So you have to hold on to it for like a year or two or even longer than that and hope like nothing happens to it, like no dents or anything like that if it's in a box. And one of the things that like with Amazon FBA, it's like part of that is finding the right products that you're able to get at a good price and then offering them on Amazon FBA in a way that you're making a profit. So how do you find the products that you sell for a profit on Amazon FBA?
Yeah, great question. That's kind of like the huge pain point I had, and that's why Jungle Scout was born. But I'd be happy to touch on that because this, especially for probably a lot of people listening to this podcast right now, and really all like e-commerce sellers, once you like figure out how it works, once you figure out how the Amazon system works, and it's pretty simple. It's like you send your products into their warehouse, you create the listing, which is a fairly simple process. After that, once people start purchasing it, they do, like I said, the pick, pack, shipping, even the customer support. So at that point, to scale up your business, you really just need more products. You don't need a bigger warehouse. You don't need to create a call center. You don't even have to worry about like managing your website or anything, right? You just have to worry about how, like which new products to launch. That's really like the big problem that Amazon sellers have. So back before Jungle Scout, I would create these big spreadsheets, and on these spreadsheets, I would include a bunch of things like how much demand there is for the product. I would figure this out using something called the best sellers rank. I would determine how much competition there was. The primary gauge for this is the number of reviews that my competitors have. And then I would also look at things, like the profit margins for that product. I'd make sure to stay away from like any like legal issues like patents. And there's a few other little things that I looked at. Okay. So these are like the spreadsheets that I used to create back then. And this is the same methodology that I use today when I launch new products. So I'm looking for something with high demand, yet low competition, good profit margins. I prefer small and lightweight products because they're less of a headache to deal with Amazon. And then I look for products that have like a low seasonality. So I try to stay away from like Christmas lights or blow up, like Easter bunnies or whatever else, because these products only sell for like a short period of time each year. And they're quite a bit of work for like a relatively low return since you're just making money off them for like a couple of months. So that's like the methodology that I use. However, a lot of people listening to this probably say, like, okay, cool. Like that makes sense. That's fine. But like, I want the actual like tactical stuff to make this happen. So I'd be happy to share that with you too. You want me to go into that, or were you about to ask another question?
Yes, I was going to, you were going right into it as, like some people like for me, for instance, I've heard like about Amazon FBA. I've never actually done anything with it. So how can people start embracing it as a side gig that doesn't take too much time, but also like, what do you do just like get in? Because I feel like starting, like anything in general, starting is the hardest part. So how do we start, make it a side gig, and then develop it?
Yeah. So I'd say step number one is to get educated about it, right? And, if you're listening to this podcast, which you are if you're hearing me right now, this is like a great start, right? Because you're learning about it and you're becoming educated about the topic. If you want to learn more, there's a case study on our website. It's totally free for anyone to use. It's called the $1 Million Case Study. And we do the same thing. We walk through step by step how to launch a product on Amazon. So you can check that out if you're interested in it. But to get started on Amazon, really after becoming educated, step number one is finding what you want to sell. Okay. So, I went over kind of like the big picture criteria, but let me dive into that a little bit deeper so you have the actual information you need to choose these products. So I look for products that are selling well on Amazon currently. So a lot of people, when they're going to choose what type of products to sell, they're thinking, I'm going to sell something not on Amazon yet because my mom was looking for this product on Amazon. She couldn't find it. So I'm sure that other people are too. It's like, well, that's actually not always true. What's a much safer bet is just to sell what's already selling well on Amazon. So that way we know people are already typing into the search bar for that product and purchasing it. Okay. So the way you can do this is there's a number on each Amazon listing called the best sellers rank. If you scroll down the page, it's under this section called product details. You can take that bestseller rank. And again, we have another free tool. You can find it at junglescott.com/estimator. You can put this bestseller rank into this totally free tool, and it will tell you how many units that product's selling on a monthly basis. So by doing this, without paying for anything, you can figure out how many units these listings are selling on a monthly basis. So that's how you figure out the demand. As far as the competition, the lower number, the reviews, the better. And those are really like the biggest two important factors when you're choosing what you want to sell. So then after you've chosen what to sell, that's when you have to look where you want to source these products from. But before we get to that, does all that make sense to you?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, cool. So, now that you've figured out like what sells well on Amazon yet has low competition, you have to figure out where you get these products from. I'm going to call these kind of like old school ways, but there's a few different ways to source your products. The easiest, lowest barrier of entry yet least scalable way would be to source these products from like Walmart, Target, liquidation sales. Sorry about that. The mic stand just fell. 1 second. All right. So the easiest place to source these are from like Walmart, Target, or other places that sell these items like at liquidation type prices. This is like the lowest barrier of entry. The downside is it's not very scalable. So I don't prefer that method too much. Another place is to source them from wholesalers. So these would be like the people who sell Sony products or Black & Decker or other products that you're familiar with. The downside here is these are very competitive on Amazon, and you typically have to have like a fairly large business for them to like create an account for you. So the method I prefer is actually to get all these products directly from the factory. And that seems a little intimidating to most people when they first hear that. However, it's not quite as hard as you think. Pretty much all the factories in Asia, but specifically China, are listed on Alibaba. And it's actually pretty easy to get in touch with them, and they're happy to create orders for people, even if you're not like an established business. So this is pretty easy to do just as kind of like a side hustle. So for example, if I found that, one of my products on Amazon are like bamboo marshmallow sticks, if I found bamboo marshmallow sticks were a good opportunity, then I'd search for bamboo marshmallow sticks on Alibaba. I would see the suppliers on there, and I would start contacting them, asking them, for things like pricing, the minimum order quantity, all that type of stuff. So that's in a nutshell how you locate the opportunity or the type of product you want to sell on Amazon and where you get it from.
So it's interesting how you're using Alibaba to reach out to the people who can basically wholesale you or basically give you a lot of the products for a lower price than you would find it on a place like Amazon, and then being able to sell that product on Amazon. And is this specifically how you started? I know you don't recommend buying in Walmart or some of the other things, but did you start off by buying something at Walmart just to like get a feel for it and sell it on Amazon, or did you start with going to Alibaba?
Yeah, great question. So actually, I would say probably like my first 10 sales were what they call like retail arbitrage. So these are like buying, like from the discount aisle at Toys R Us or whatever, and then sending it into Amazon and selling it there. I maybe made a small amount of money on that. And probably what's more beneficial is I learned kind of like how the Amazon Seller Central platform works. But I quickly realized that that wasn't very scalable. It was more so like an educational process, right? And then shortly thereafter is when I placed my first order from a factory on Alibaba.
Some people listening to this may be wondering, like, because obviously this is a form of investment where you're investing in this product, hoping that you could sell it at a higher price. So I know that it's different depending on the wholesaler, depending on you, but can you give us an idea of what someone who is new to this, like how much product or like how much you have to invest in Alibaba to get bulk products, like an example, perhaps, just to give us an idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So most of my products, my initial order will be like typically no lower than 500 units and usually closer to 1,000. That being said, I'm quite familiar with the process and I'm confident kind of like in my researching abilities. So that many of units, seems pretty intimidating to most people listening to this for the first time. But like another example is I actually interviewed a guy yesterday and his initial order for the product he was selling was 100 units. So it was, I think he paid $450 per unit. He ordered 100 units, so it's $450 for his first order. And I'd say one of the largest downsides of this particular business model is it is fairly cash intensive. If you're trying to get started, for like under $100, private labeling these products, ordering them off Alibaba and selling them on Amazon's probably not the best opportunity for you because it's pretty hard to get started for a very low amount of money. If you say have like $1,000 to spend, then this is probably a more realistic option for you.
And to transition gears a little bit, when it comes to Amazon FBA or any goal, I mean, we have all these ideas floating in our head. We have these goals that we set. Some people, they feel like they haven't really hit their goal yet. They haven't really tapped into their potential. And I'm wondering what you believe holds most people back from reaching their full potential.
Great question. As far as getting started, I think that's probably like the hardest part for people. And we kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, right? Because once you get started, I feel like it's fairly easy to reach your full potential after that because like you've crossed the biggest hurdle. So I think what holds people back from getting started is actually like little, we'll call them even like silly things, like looking back on them, because they'll be just like small little hurdles or like problems that you get kind of stuck on, even though they're not that big of a deal. So like an issue might be, something that like I see people get hung up on is like shipping the products from, China to the distribution centers in the US. Once you figure out how to do it, it's really easy. But that's like one of those little hurdles that I think like holds a lot of people up that they're not quite sure how to do it. So like my best advice for you there is I think it's like really important to join some kind of group where there's other people that maybe are a little bit past where you're at. So if you're just trying to get started on Amazon, a great place for you to maybe like join one of these little communities would be a place like Reddit, or there's lots of Facebook groups, or there's even like a Seller Central forum that Amazon hosts. These would all be areas that like you could find a group to kind of ask some of these like little simple questions that may be like kind of hanging you up.
Greg, I really love the idea of getting into the right groups, as we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with, and putting ourselves with like-minded people will help us to achieve our goals. And starting is definitely something that, like once you start, it gets a lot easier from there. I feel like we can all relate to this, starting something new. Starting point is just really hard, but as we get through, it gets easier. But when we do start, there are going to be challenges there, and challenges just keep coming up. And with that in mind, Greg, I'm wondering if you could share with us one big challenge you faced in your Amazon FBA journey and a powerful lesson you learned during that challenge.
Good one. Man, over the years, I've experienced a lot of challenges. Let me try to think about some of the ones from the earlier days that probably most people could relate with. I remember one challenge was I had ordered this product. I think I'd ordered, 500 or 1,000 units, and it arrived at my house. I was inspecting it before I sent it into the Amazon distribution centers, and it was obvious to me that when they put the packages like into the master cartons, if you can imagine, there's like 50 units in one master carton. I guess like the ink on the packaging was still a little bit wet because it had smudged on the other items kind of like right next to it. So, at the time I was kind of like, I was a little bit devastated, really. I was like, I just spent whatever, $1,000 or a couple $1,000s on this order. It arrived in my house, and I don't think it is like of the quality that I should send into Amazon because I think it's going to get bad reviews. So at the time, I think I was like pretty beat up over this, if I remember right. The solution was actually pretty simple. The supplier was able to send me new packaging that wasn't smudged. They did it for free, but it was still a hassle for me because I had to take the product out of the old packaging and put it into the new one. So I did it with like 500 units. So it took like maybe half a Saturday to do that. So it was frustrating. It was a challenge at the time, but like looking back, it wasn't that big of a deal. But the one big lesson I learned from that was I either A, get inspections done before they're sent to me, or B, I have the factory just take a whole bunch of pictures like with their cell phone before they send the products to me. So that was like a good lesson that kind of to make sure that type of thing doesn't happen again.
It's interesting to hear like some of the challenges. It's not always based on things that you do. It's like based on things that just happen to happen. Like in this case where you didn't get the units the way that you expected them. And how exactly do you tell a company to like do the inspection for it? Do you just like say to them, I'll only buy it if you do the inspection, or if you let me see pictures? Like, what's your approach on that?
Yeah, totally. So you can, I recommend just put together like a little purchase agreement when you're buying the goods. And in there, I always have that if it doesn't pass inspection, they have to fix whatever's wrong, and they have to pay for the second inspection. And that's actually relatively common when you're purchasing goods from factories. So no one even, gives me a hard time about that. Every factory's agreed to that.
Well, it's good to know that it's easy to get those types of inspections to make sure the product is safe and the way you would expect it to be. And one of the things you mentioned before is that a great thing for starters to do is to learn more about Amazon FBA. And with that in mind, Greg, I'm wondering if you could share with us 3 books that you believe would have a positive impact on us. These can be Amazon FBA based. These could be motivational, business based, just books that you believe would have a positive impact on us.
So my favorite book of all time is called Rework by Jason Fried, the founder of Basecamp. It's like a really refreshing take on like how to run modern businesses. So that's probably like my favorite book that I would recommend anyone to read. It's, since he is the founder of a software company, a lot of it relates to software, but I think the same principles can be used in business in general. Probably my second favorite book is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I think that's just like a timeless book about like how to be like an effective leader and how to like effectively, as the title says, I guess just kind of like influence people. So that's one I really like. If I were to choose a third, I might choose 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. I personally, I'm an entrepreneur at heart and I love working. It's what I do for fun. But I think if you kind of read the book, understanding that, at the end of the day, it's not really about working 4-hour work weeks. It's more so about like rethinking what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And if that like really makes you happy or fulfills you. So I think if you haven't read that one, I'd recommend it as well.
Greg, thank you for those great book recommendations. Those links will be over at markberty.com/E117. E117 along with the show notes. And if you guys want a free audiobook and you are not an Audible member yet, Audible is offering Breakthrough Success listeners a free book. That's over at markberty.com/audible. That will also be in the show notes. And before we wrap up this episode, I would like to flip the stage a little bit. So, Greg, I've asked you several questions throughout our time together, but what do you believe is one question that we need to be asking ourselves more often?
One question I think we need to be asking ourselves more often is, if I look back on my life 3 to 5 years down the road, will I be happy that I was spending my time today the way that I'm currently spending it? So, when you reflect back on your life, will you be happy and say, yes, that is how, I wanted to be spending my time. That's how, I think like I progressed the most in life and is what ultimately brought me the most happiness.
Greg, that is a really great question. And I believe we should all think about questions like these to continue to ask ourselves, because by asking ourselves questions, we're able to ignite deeper reflection, which allows us to come across better conclusions on how to live our lives and do what we want to do. And I can't thank you enough for sharing all of your great insights about Amazon FBA and getting that off the ground and scaling it into an enterprise. And for anyone who wants to keep in the tabs with Greg, see some of the things he's coming out with, he is actually launching a Shark Tank style podcast called Go Pitch Win. It is a new podcast, so definitely be sure to check it out. Subscribe if you like the episodes, and definitely give him a good review as well if you like the episodes as well. Greg, I can't thank you enough for spending all this time in this episode today. It was a pleasure to have you on the show.
Mark, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Take care.
How does over 100 retweets per day sound to you? My free ebook, 27 Ways to Get More Retweets on Twitter, has you covered. I use the methods within this ebook to get over 10,000 retweets every single quarter. To learn more and get access to this free resource, visit markberty.com/